And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFLW player chat. And ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, this is an awesome chat for me. You guys know I'm a Swans fan, but I respect all the teams in the AFL and the AFLW. So I gotta find players to chat with. And I conveniently have a good friend in Emma Phillips who connected me with what I consider one of the best players on the GWS Giants, and that is Miss Alicia Eva. Alicia, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Donnie. I know it's been a couple of weeks trying to work through a date and to get it happening, but here we are. So
Hey,
let's get stuck into it.
you got to have patience, and you got to be able to be flexible when it comes to podcasting. So absolutely no problem there, Alicia. So let's dive right into it. I always like starting my
hmm
podcasts off. I mean, we talk footy. I like to talk footy with anybody, but I kind of like to know the person a little bit. So if you want to tell me just a little bit about yourself outside of the game of footy.
Mm. Oh, uh, a large part of my life is footy. I guess so. I'll try and give you the fun facts. I have played footy from a really young age, from the age of I guess 4 or 5. So I live in Sydney now and played for the Greater Western Sydney Giants, but grew up in Melbourne, and that's where my love of footy really kicked off. Grew up barracking for the Melbourne Demons. Anyway, outside of footy, I am a one of 4 children to my mum and dad, one of 3 girls, and I have a younger brother. I play guitar. Some would say, well, I would say pretty poorly, but I enjoy it. I studied psychology, so I've actually just completed my master's of psychology. Um, and yeah, I'm also a coach in the AFL pathway with the Giants. So yeah, there's not a whole heap of other stuff that I do outside of footy, but I like to keep myself pretty busy. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Oh, that is absolutely awesome. I love it. I am a footy head over here. In fact, I coach a team over here in my state of Iowa, the Des Moines Roosters. So anytime I can talk with a person that coaches, I absolutely love it. So let's jump into it. Let's go back into the time machine a little bit. As you said, you grew up
Mm,
with footy. You grew up in a footy family. What is your earliest
yeah.
footballing memory?
Um, I when I say I grew up obsessed with AFL football, my brother and I, we knew the words to every club theme song. We'd go on. My family used to have, our family holidays would be driving holidays a lot of the time, with dad's work, and we'd have a CD of all of the club theme songs. And poor mum and dad, they had to put up with us kids listening to all of those songs. And I was just really, really footy obsessed. Every day after school, I'd kick the footy in the park across the road with my brother. Probably my earliest memory was just going down to Auskick at the age of 5. So I was the only girl then, but didn't realise at the time because you're just a 5-year-old kid. I had a big number 9 Melbourne Demons jumper. David Neitz was my favourite player. I don't know if anyone over there knows the great David Neitz, but he was the star of my world from a very young age, and he was up on my wall, and it was fun to go down to Auskick every week wearing the number 9 on my back, running around.
That's fantastic. It's always great. And I love hearing the names of the old past. I'm trying to dive into it a little bit. I've had a lot of my Sydney Swan supporters like there's such a great history. And so I'm trying to dive into a little bit of the South Melbourne history and all that. So I absolutely
Yeah.
love that. That's fantastic. So since you're still playing footy, what's your favorite part
hmm
about playing the game of footy?
Um. Oh, Donnie, that's a great question. I think it's the game. Um, it's I mean, you play with structure and you play with systems, but I still think it's a game of great unpredictability. Um, and I love that. I love that you sometimes it's, that old saying, and as a coach, you'd know it well, it doesn't just take talent, it takes effort as well. And I think when the game throws up so many different unpredictable moments, the ball could bounce one way, it could, it's a game of momentum. I love that challenge, and I love that it's a game that all shapes and sizes can play. And I think that's what I really loved about it growing up. There are all these, there's so many skills to the game as well, different skills that you can work on and try and finesse. So for me, it's probably the unpredictability in a sense, that it's a game for all shapes and sizes, and that there's so many different skills that you need to kind of get right to play the game well.
Yeah, very, very true. Very encompassing. And the best part about it is that you can always find a place to put somebody to play the game of footy. Absolutely love that. So
Mm,
you said it. You grew up a Melbourne. You grew up a Melbourne Demons supporter. My next question is, what club did you
mhm.
support? So I'll ask this: was your entire family D supporters, or did you grab the D's, defying your parents a little bit?
No, definitely not. My grandparents were, on dad's side anyway, very staunch Melbourne Demon supporters. So I think from birth, mum's British, so she grew up in the UK, so she didn't have a team to grow up barracking for. So we all just naturally fell into the Melbourne Demons bandwagon. And trust me, Donnie, there's been some tough years being a Melbourne supporter, particularly after the 2000 grand final that we lost to Essendon. Then everything just seemed to go downhill from there. But yeah, it was fantastic to see the D's get up last year, although I'm very much a Giants person now, but that was very special. Unfortunately, none of the family could get over to Perth for the grand final because of COVID, of course. But
Mhm.
yeah, all still very much staunch Demon supporters, but of course, Giants and the AFLW.
And that's I was just about to ask this. I chatted with Steph Giochi, and she grew up a diehard Carlton fan, and I had to ask, since she grew up
Yeah,
a Carlton fan, now she plays for Collingwood. I said,
yeah.
does your family just support you, or do they support Collingwood? And she said, yep, my dad supports Carlton in the men's and Collingwood in the women's. So I was gonna ask, are they Giant supporters for the AFLW now?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. My family, they still live in Melbourne predominantly, but I'm really lucky that they travel to most games, particularly mum and dad. They get up to Sydney. My sisters and her children, they're all running around in little Giants jerseys, which is really cool. So yeah, very much AFLW, Giants AFLW supporters. They really ride the roller coaster with us, and I'm really lucky to have a great support system down there. But you know, one thing that was really special in my journey is I was lucky enough to play in the first ever exhibition game at the MCG in 2013. And I think I don't know how old I was at the time. I'd be showing my age, but I was drafted. I was playing for Melbourne, and I think you know when I grew up, I wore the number 9 jumper because I idolised David Neitz, but I was never going to be David Neitz. I had him on my wall, but I was never going to play AFL. And I think when I played in that exhibition game and I got my own jumper, that was pretty cool. I kicked a goal in the MCG, celebrated like a goose, and I had all of my family there dressed in their Melbourne kit, enjoying that time. And I think that was a really special moment for me. Probably when I was 12, 13, thinking that I'd never have the opportunity to run around in a Melbourne jumper on the MCG. I guess yeah, that dream became a reality that night. So that's always been a fond memory for me and my family.
Fantastic. That's awesome. That is a great story. So, and actually, it's a perfect lead in. So let's go back to AFLW, the first ever draft.
Mm,
You get drafted by
yeah.
Collingwood. As a Demon supporter, that was probably an interesting one. So, what was your reaction when you heard your name called out that you were going to be a Collingwood Magpie? And then, how was your family's reaction to it?
I was stoked first and foremost. I'd spoken to a few different Victorian clubs. I'd spoken to Melbourne and Bulldogs um, and Collingwood, and I'd worked with a lot of the coaches that were now taking on roles within these teams. So I had no idea where I was going to go. I didn't play footy the year before. I had my first year off footy ever. I went over to Europe and just had a bit of time off because I was pretty burnt out. So I hadn't played much footy in the last 12 months, and I was a bit nervous. Didn't know where I was going to go, what pick I was going to go, and it got into the 40s and, and into the 50s, and I was like, oh, I thought Melbourne were going to take me there. I thought the Bulldogs were going to take me there. And it was one of those days. And then when Collingwood called me out, I was so excited. Mum and Dad were there. It was hard for Dad because Melbourne supporters typically, you know, Melbourne Collingwood. There's a big rivalry there.
Hmm.
But quickly they got over it. It was a really exciting day. We went straight back to the glass house at Collingwood and with all of the other girls that were drafted that day, Steph Giochi, of course. And it was, you know, Collingwood put on a really good function. It was a big welcome to the club, and it was a really special moment to be drafted to arguably one of the biggest clubs in Australia. So that was pretty special. And yeah, my family again were all there in the Collingwood black and white for each and every game day. Um, Unfortunately, it was short lived because I was only there for the first season before I made the trek up to Sydney. But I loved my time at Collingwood. I was vice captain there and worked really close with Steph and had, you know, there's an incredible supporter base there too. Met Fernie Fern there, who I'm sure you're aware of. number
Mm-hmm.
one fan, Fernie Fern. And it had a lot of special moments there, and it was an incredible experience playing that first game of AFLW.
I was
Yeah, that was wild.
you keep taking away, you keep coming up with the questions that I had to ask you. Steph talked about it. Was that first game against Carleton, and
Yeah,
I remember it very vividly as um it was a lockout, nobody could get in, the roar of the crowd. So I got to ask, what was your kind of thoughts on that first game? Because it had to have been surreal to get a lockout first ever
yeah,
game and the roar of the crowd when that first bounce hit the ground and you guys got to play your first ever AFLW game.
yeah. It was pretty incredible. We during the week, so at the start of the week, that game was actually meant to be played at the Holden Centre, where I think it's the name might be different now, but Collingwood's training ground essentially, which doesn't hold that many people. It's doesn't have facilities in the sense of food trucks or amenities or
Mhm.
anything like that. So the game was supposed to be held there, and then during the week there was murmurs, oh, there's going to be a crowd of maybe 7,500. We might have to look at moving the venue, and talk continued during the week, and then they thought, oh, we're forecasting maybe 10,000 people, so we might have to move the venue. So of course we're not worrying about the outside noise. I'm lying there. I think we're all the most we'd ever played in front of was maybe 3,500. So it was pretty cool. Then all of a sudden the game was changed to Icon Park, which is Carlton's home ground, because they were expecting about a 12,500 crowd. So that was pretty cool. The club decided that instead of the players driving in, we'd all catch a bus in from Collingwood. And I remember sitting on that bus and we're driving in. It was so cool to see in the parks, in the parkland around Icon Park. There were so many young girls and young boys kicking the footy with mum or dad outside the ground, waiting for the gates to open. And just seeing that, and this was maybe 2.5 hours before the game, seeing how many people were around the ground, and not just young girls, young boys kicking footies with mum and dad or brother, sister, whatever it was. It really felt like a game for all. And then when we went in there, it was the change rooms. The energy was high. It was really exciting. It was a big occasion. I had all of my work colleagues coming. Everyone I knew was coming to the game. I'm one of those players that likes to go out on the ground quite a few times before, the game. So I went out just as gates opened, and I was walking around, and I could see people like literally running in to try and get seats down the very front. And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. And this is still an hour and a half before the game. I went back in, and you can tell girls are starting to get a little bit nervous, and I didn't want to say anything about the crowd. I went back out again, and this was before the main warm up, and it was definitely, it was getting pretty packed, and I thought it was probably close to the 12,000, still an hour before the game. Then we went back in again, and I could tell some girls probably didn't realise how many people were out there. And then the final time we went out was actually to run through the banner before the game. And I remember running out next to Steph, and the whole place was just heaving. It was so loud. Running through the banner, it was so loud. And in our warm-ups, as you know, you always run around the centre square. You go through the banner and then you run around the centre square. And we did that. And I just remember as we were running around, and this is in the warm-up, every single person in the stadium just stood up and were applauding. And the game hadn't even started yet. And it didn't matter if you're a Collingwood supporter or a Carlton supporter. I think, people were there just applauding, not necessarily the two teams are about to play, but the moment for women's footy and for the women that had gone before as well, of which there were so many talented footballers who just never got the opportunity. So it really felt like a moment in time in which everyone kind of recognised the significance of the game. Then the game started, of course, and I remember Wayne Seekman, our coach. I'm pretty short, one of the shortest in the teams I play in. So I stand at the front of the huddle, and Wayne Seekman, the coach, was in front of me addressing the team. And I remember he was talking, and this is a really funny memory now. I could hear Sam Lane, one of the commentators, over the ground mic. I heard her just say over the system to the whole ground that they'd had to lock the gates. It was a sellout. There's 22,500 people there. And that was pretty cool. I don't know what Wayne's message was at quarter time. It could have been why it was one way. Maybe didn't play very well that next quarter, but it was a pretty phenomenal experience and pretty special memory.
That is absolutely fantastic. I remember when Steph was telling me about seeing all the cars as the bus came in, and she's like, "Wait, It's 2.5 hours before the game. Why are so many people here? So it was just a really
Yeah,
cool, like, it's just a really cool memory. I remember I didn't get the chance to watch the game at the time, but I remember seeing the photos and then eventually seeing the highlights, and it was absolutely fantastic. And it was absolutely great. And it's only grown since then. I'm super happy about that. So we'll go to my next
yeah,
question. And I love this one. This one's a lot of fun. I'm going to let you humble brag. What's your biggest
that
accomplishment as a
oh,
footballer so far?
uh, biggest accomplishment. I guess my first season when I came up here to the Giants, I probably had my strongest season. It was, I made the All Australian squad that first year, and then made the team the second year, and that was coming off the back of playing predominantly as an inside mid, a pretty undersized inside mid, um, in which was a pretty tough team coming up here. Coming away from family, it was really cool to have a coach look at me through a different lens, and give me the opportunity to just kind of scrap away. And I ended up, I felt like people talk about flow state in sport, where you kind of hit that sweet spot where you're not kind of thinking about anything, you're just playing and you play really well. I kind of felt like that season for me was kind of a bit of a flow state, where I was just enjoying my time, loving my footy, and making that All Australian team that year was pretty cool. Playing that exhibition game, that first ever exhibition game, is pretty close too. That was, you look at the names. If you look at those photos now, um, of who played in those two teams, like, it's pretty incredible the the caliber of players that were in both of those squads. To have been a part of that was really special, to be part of that original team. And also, I guess, yeah, to captain a side, that's not something that I take lightly at all. It's something that I'm really proud of. It's something that it's certainly an honor and a privilege. And um, I've had so many wonderful memories at all of the footy clubs I've been involved with. That there's something really special about being part of a pretty young club, and you're building a legacy. And I think it's, to have been a few weeks ago, was awarded life membership of the Giants. I haven't retired yet. I've still got a lot of footy left, but to have been awarded life membership of an AFL club, um, it's pretty cool. It's something that I probably in time will reflect on a little bit more. It's still, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool feeling.
And a young club too, a club that's still growing and progressing. So that's really awesome as well. So let's dive
Mm.
into it. As you're at GWS, and I like finding out about this because the personality is a little bit different when it comes to the men's and the women's games. So who's your best mate at GWS right now?
Oh God. I've got too many, Donny. Oh
You can give
gosh.
me you can give me multiple if you want, or you can just say the entire team. I mean, I've
I,
almost had that answer before.
I I like to think I've got great relationships with all of my teammates. I used to live with Annalise Lister, so she was my housemate for a while. Um, uh, Great mates with Nick Barr, and Izzy Huntington. Of course, I coached her initially, and then we convinced her to come up to Sydney. And yeah, she's a great girl. Yeah, very close to a lot of the girls. Work really closely with Parks. She's another one that I've coached. And the dynamic of, coach to then teammate to then captain and vice captain. We've had so many different dynamics to our relationship. But she's a star, Parks, and I can't wait to see what she does. But yeah, I reckon I have Cora. I love Cora. All of them, Donnie. I love them all.
Hey, that's that's
Hopefully
that is
they love me.
that is not a bad thing at all. And it's great to
Mm.
see in with everything that's gone on and all that. It's to have the personal relationships that you do over the years. That it's nothing but great. I just like hearing sometimes they have that one person that they always kind of float to. So we'll stay on that since you're
Yeah.
best mates with
Yeah.
almost all on the team. What's the room like now? What's the room like? Is it very relaxed? Is it very business like? Like what's the GWS room for you?
And I should mention Pepper Randall, actually. We came up the same year, and we could not be more opposite, but she's actually one of my closest mates for sure. And the reason why she sprung to mind is because what is the room like? So I work in the men's program as well, and I think our game day preparation is very different, and that's not necessarily how it is with all AFLW clubs, but ours is we've got a pretty young group now, minus a few of the Irish and some of us older girls. We're actually a really, really young side, and I think what can happen is some young girls can, they need to approach the game, almost kind of get into that flow state before the game where they're not thinking about what's to come. It's almost kind of be present here and now, get your prep done. And that for us involves some high quality music, some speakers blaring. Georgia Garnett prides herself on bringing the game day playlist, and she's a bit of a hype girl for us, Georgia Garnett. So yeah, I would say it's pretty high energy, but pretty measured too. We don't want girls expending all their energy before the game. We've got some girls who like to keep to themselves, so they'll put their noise cancelling headphones on and do their foam rolling and whatnot. But majority of the group, again, pretty young, I think. They like to do things in a way that probably distracts them from, thinking ahead of time and thinking about the game too much before the ball's actually bounced.
Yeah, makes sense. Don't want to lose all that energy just getting the hype up. So completely understand that. So we'll go with this. And I know yours is probably a lot different because of your coaching background and everything like this. But what's a typical day for you? Because unfortunately, as we all know, and again, I've railed on this many a time on my podcast that unfortunately you ladies are still not 100% professional athletes, and a travesty at that. An ally you have in me. I rail on this a lot on the podcast for sure. So what's kind of your typical day, considering you do have to supplement your income with a regular everyday job most of the time?
Yeah, good question. It's so I'm probably a little bit different in the sense that most recently I was completing my masters, so I've had my coaching role. The club have been really great with me. I coached during the men's season. Then we will cross over into AFLW. That becomes my priority. But in a day where I do have crossover with the men's and the women's program, I will rock into the club at usually 7:00 start with the men's program. For 7:30 meetings, and we'll do our meetings. Then we go out on the track with the boys if it's a main training, which will go from 8:45 till 10:30. Then we'll come off the track and do some craft then with the boys. So they have a solid session. So then as a development coach, I'm often involved in the craft that we do after as well. We might do some vision with some of the players. So this is typical in season for AFL. Do some vision from the game that week, sit down and make sure we tick off the feedback for the players. Then we'll have another coaches meeting in the afternoon. And then at about 3:00, I'll roll out of the AFL program into AFL women's program. And so I'll start doing my, probably go to the physio and get my treatments done for about half an hour. Then we start, and then I get taped for another half an hour because if anyone sees me play, they say that I'm fairly taped up these days. Then we start our prep. There's about a half an hour of prep work, 15 minutes of craft work before training even starts, which is it's optional for players. But from about 3:00 onwards, I'm straight into AFLW mode. And then training from 5:30 till 7, and then do weights, my own weights. And then we do recovery or review, which might be a meeting, and then we get out of there, usually around 9:00 at night. So some days, some of the big days where I'm at the club, if there is a typical, if it's during the men's season and AFLW pre-season, I'll be there from 7:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night, which is a long day. That's why I say I almost live at the footy club. But in saying that, the club have been really great with me in understanding that, the reason I moved up to the Giants was because of coaching opportunity that I couldn't say no to. It was to get my foot in the door within an AFL system. I've been a coach since the age of 19 or 18. So that's 12 years of my life. So when they offered me a coaching opportunity at the club, it said, look, we want you to be a player first and foremost. So do what you need to do. It was something that I couldn't say no to. So I'm really lucky that they do tell me to, I'm supposed to be having time off at the moment. But with our new coaches, the Giants AFL side have got a whole brand new coaching list come through, new game plan, everything. So I will opt to have my time off a little bit in a few weeks' time, just after the Christmas period, because I want to get my head around the new game plan and make sure I'm not coming in blind in the new year. So, yeah, that's my typical day at the footy club. hope that provides some insight.
And that's fantastic to hear, it very interesting to hear that you have such a busy day, especially earlier in the year, and especially with the two seasons this particular year. But it's just waged war on you with the body a little bit. So I hoping you get a little bit of time to yourself a little bit come here very soon. But we won't go to that. So we'll go back into player mode a little. We'll go back into player mode a little
Yeah.
bit. Is there a player that growing up, as you said, you were a Demons fan and you had your favorite player, but was there a player that you modeled your game after?
Um. Oh, male or female?
Either or.
Either or. I guess growing up, um, women playing footy wasn't visible. And the
Mhm.
first time I noticed, I was often the only girl in in the team. Um, so there weren't that many visible role models as a woman playing footy until Debbie Lee appeared in a TV show called, I think it was The Club or something like that. I'm not sure if people have heard of that, but there was a TV show in the 90s, and it was they were pretty much putting together a VFL side, and they invited all these local footballers. And of course, Debbie Lee, who's a champion of our game, she threw her hat in the ring, and it created a bit of a storm and a story because she was better than most of these blokes. And unfortunately, I don't think she was allowed to play. But that was the first really visible female footballer I saw as a young girl growing up. During my childhood, it was probably any Melbourne Demon footballer. I thought I could kick goals like David Neitz. He was a key forward. I'm certainly not a key forward. Aaron Davey, he'd snap the footy like you wouldn't believe. I loved kicking check sides and bananas in the park through the goals. Shane Woden was that blonde haired winger who won the Brownlow in 2000. He was I guess I love to run and carry. Probably don't do it a whole heap. Or as much as I should, but I'm probably more of a run and carry player, or certainly have been in the past. So they were the kind of players that I modelled my game on. I took the bits and pieces out of so many different players, but when you go to the park and you're growing up and you pretend to be the player that kicks a goal after the siren, or you take mark of the year, or bits and pieces like that. As I got a little bit older, Daisy was, and I started playing VFLW footy. Daisy was, Daisy was Daisy. She was a star. She could kick on both feet. She had super hands. She was an elite midfielder, great footy sense. Karen Paxman was the same. They were just a 1-2 punch playing for Darebin. I was always in awe of them. But there's been so many phenomenal footballers that I've been lucky to play with and against. Ellie Blackburn, I coached her originally. Actually played against her, played with her, then coached her. Now play against her again. M. Carney. There's too many, but at the same time, I also think when you grow as a footballer and you develop, you understand what your strengths are, and then you need to keep working away on the elements of your game that you need to get better at, but really don't stop working on the strengths. And I think that's something I've been able to do. Particularly in my early years of AFLW, just focus on what makes me a good footballer. Why am I here? What do I bring to this team? What does this team need from me? And continue to get better. No matter how old you are, how experienced you are, there's always something you can get better at. So that's my ethos. I turned your question into something completely different, Donnie. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It can be a Frankenstein question if it's one of those that you take a little bit from each person's game and you kind of adapt it to yours. I think is a perfect way to kind of answer that. So not a problem there. So you threw out a lot of names that have a lot of clout in the AFLW. So I got to ask this: being a midfielder, you
Yeah.
see some of the best, toughest opponent you
Mm.
have ever played against.
Oh. In recent times, Monconti. She's just got amazing 360 spatial awareness. She can just get out of the traffic so easily. At the contest, she's really hard to stop because she can find space where there is none. So she's done a job on us the last few games. M. Carney's really hard to play on in the sense that she's just so powerful. Bree Davey, extremely powerful midfielder. So you need to play differently on players like that. The way you approach playing on Bree Davey or matching up on Bree Davey is going to be really different to how you would on Maddie Prasparkas or Karen Paxman. So they all come with their different challenges, and I think that's what I love about footy. It's unpredictable, and each player's got their strengths and weaknesses, or their opportunities, or how to exploit them. So you got to think. But Mon Conti in recent times, she had another outstanding season. She's a jet.
Yeah.
Yeah, star.
She's one that it's scary to think that for the longest time she was focused on both basketball and footy, and now she's fully focused on footy. It'll be interesting to see how she progresses. I cannot wait to see that. So we'll go to the next one. We're going to go to the Giants a little bit in on this. Kind of thoughts on last season, on season 7.
Yeah, I've spoken about this a fair bit as of late, with end of season reflections and whatnot. Look, it was we at the start of the season we set aside a goal that we wanted to play finals, and we know that there was a little bit of change. We were pretty young, but we had a brand new coach, brand new game plan. Wanted to put a heap of speed on the ball, play a faster brand of footy, and pre-season we were flying. Practice game we were flying. Round 1 we were disappointed that we narrowly lost to the Bulldogs. We thought we probably, there were opportunities where we didn't take our opportunities, and we should have won that game. And that was with our new game style. We had more avenues to goal than just Cora. Then we took on I can't remember who we had round 2, but we played Brisbane in Canberra, and we had a really strong start against them. I think we kicked 3 goals in the first quarter, and they didn't hit the scoreboard, but and we were up and about. But the battles of a young side and momentum, and coming up against a quality side like Brisbane, they dug in and got going, and we weren't able to stay with them. And I think the positives that came out of that game was that, okay, we've got a brand that when we play consistently, and we have the ability to stop momentum, we've got a brand that stacks up against the best. So we're really confident about that. And then at the end of that round 3 game, we lost our entire starting midfield through long-term injuries, which we didn't see coming. And which, I think I had dinner with our coach last night, and both of us both said, like, we never want our season to be defined by injuries. And it isn't, and it won't be, but it's remiss of us not to talk about it, because then it does become the story of our season. We had a lot of our young girls play ahead of time, probably play in positions ahead of time, or even played a game when they were probably expecting 12 months of development before they got a game. And credit to some of our really young players who don't have a heap of experience. They did their job, and we didn't end up playing finals. So in that sense, we failed this season. But we need to take out of it. We can sit back and be annoyed about the season, go on, and then just hope for the best again in 2023, or we can take the learnings out of this year, which is, okay, we've got 12 months of development into some girls who probably weren't expecting it. Some key areas that we're not strong enough perhaps became more apparent. So we need to go to work on them over the off season. But all in all, I think it was fantastic. The highlight of my year was to see Georgia Garnett really establish herself as a forward, a quality forward in the competition. Tani Evans as well, a rising star, Nom, and I think she's the best kick in our team, if not the best kick in the competition. To see her really stand up down back. Emily Pease, unfortunately, she did her knee as well halfway through the season. But to see the young girls who are, in their second, third year of footy, really stand up when the chips were down, that's, that was massive for us. So I know there's a real energy of being, or there's a real vibe that the girls are impatient for success, and that's not a bad thing. I actually encourage that. We want to be impatient. We want to work hard over the summer. We want to play finals footy. We're not shying away from that. That's our goal. So we've just got to get better.
In 100%. And unfortunately, again, injuries are something that you can't avoid. It happens. So I was going to ask this next question, but I think you kind of answered it. Do you think at all that this season could be deemed a success?
Well, I guess it depends how you define success. Is it with wins and losses? And if it's wins and losses, then no, it wasn't a success. But if you define success as, looking holistically across we knew that we were coming with a new game plan and a new coach, and we want to play finals footy. We don't shy away from that, but we understand that there's a process. You don't just become a good club overnight. It's actually, it takes a bit of work. It's a process. So there are certain tick boxes along that process that you need to tick to become successful, to be a successful side. And I certainly think we did. We ticked some of those boxes this year. I go back to some of the young girls and the progress that some of those girls have made. I think some players have showed greater versatility that perhaps in seasons gone by they may not have had that opportunity. So it was a season where opportunities were granted to girls, and I think majority of them took that, and gives us something to think about over summer. If we can get more areas of our game right, keep ticking more of those boxes along the way, it leads to success. So yeah, I guess it depends on the definition, Donnie.
I 100%. I love your answer on that, because for some people, like as a Swan supporter, I've talked to a few of the Swan. I've talked to a few of the Swans players, and I've asked. I said, "Do you consider your season a success?" And for me, I did, because I considered the Swan season a success because there's a lot of gains on that on a young side. And I think, yes, they didn't get a win this season, which I mean stinks as a supporter, but I saw growth. I saw structure. I saw some changes in this team that at the start of the season to the end of the season, it was vastly different. So success, it's a term anybody can use anyway. Anybody can find a success. So I loved your answer on that. So we'll go the opposite way. What do you think was the biggest challenge for you and for GWS this season?
The biggest challenge was probably when we after round 3, when we did lose a number of players very quickly. It tested, our round 3 side looked vastly different the next week. It tested a lot of, we talk about lists. We have a list of 30, and I think we were down to. We had about 21 players to choose from, and we had to throw people around in different positions. And I think the biggest challenge was Cam Bernasconi, our head coach. He wanted to make sure that all year he wanted to coach the new system, new game plan, didn't want any Band-Aid solutions. And I think, that happened, and credit to him. He could have very easily coached in a way that was ultra, ultra defensive, just make it ugly, 50-meter bubble footy, and just try and shut the game down to limit any damage. But there's no growth in that for us as players. There's no, how do our young players develop playing that way? So I guess the challenge was trying to stick to that game plan, trying to play in a fashion that the coaches, is exciting, fast footy, full well knowing that some girls are very, they don't have a heap of experience playing that way. There were always going to be bumps in the road. There was always going to be, we're going to get scored against playing that way. And in some games, it really did open up, and that was really hard, particularly as a leader, to kind of, stand up and say, no, we're sticking true to this. This formula, if we get it right, is what successful teams right now are doing. So we can treat this year as, the chips are down, we've lost all our players, let's just try and limit the damage, or we can continue down the path of what we're trying to do. So, the challenge in that was just, I guess when you're a competitive person, like I am, and you do, you want to win. That's not beat around the bush. I want to win. Understanding that it's not going to happen overnight, particularly some of the challenges that were thrown our way. That was a bit of a challenge, but that's part of leadership, and that's part of our journey and where we're going.
Awesome. And I love it. And the best part is that you don't teach a bad habit to some of the young players too. And you're teaching them the style that you want to play. Yes, you're going to go through your bumps, you're going to take your lumps, but in the long run, they're going to learn how to play the style of footy that you want to play in the future. So nothing but a good thing. And I respect that he didn't just take the cheap way out. I absolutely love that. So, So let's go from a little bit of the bad. One of my favorite parts about AFLW is the connection that the players have with the fans. So I'm going to ask this, and I love this. Best fan interaction you've ever had?
I have to mention Fernie Fern. I met Fernie Fern at the first ever Collingwood training. She came down on the train. I think it was an hour away, and we got chatting. And she was at every game after that. And then she bought a Giants membership when I moved up here, and has travelled across the country to watch the Giants play as her second team. And I think that's pretty special, understanding the impact you have on people. And I like to chat to a lot of our supporters up here as well. We know we've got a growing supporter base, but we've got so many special fans that drive to Canberra and follow us all over the place. So I was lucky to get a little supporter named Aubrey into the rooms when we beat the Swans. Sorry, Donnie.
It's
But
fine.
to get
I
her and
kind
her
of
mum
expected it.
to get her into the rooms, singing the song. She's come along to all of our games at Giant Stadium. So to see her there on such a special occasion for us, I just said to Dave Matthews, our CEO, sorry, can we get her family into the room so she can sing the song with us? And that was pretty cool. Just seeing the joy on her face was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Speaking of Fern, I'm very good friends with Fern. I remember, reaching out to her when I connected with Steph, and so she actually sent me a couple of questions, which is a perfect transition. I've got some supporter questions that they wanted to ask you. The first is, my
Right.
host Ross is a GWS fan, and I love, and
Uh-huh.
he doesn't do a lot of the AFLW stuff, but I'm slowly trying to get him into it. So he wanted to ask you, how would you rate the league's success this season, especially given how it was the first year with every club having an AFLW side?
How would I rate the success? Look, I do think, I think, again, it depends how you define success. But
Mhm.
look, I think we saw the level of footy go up again. Yeah, we know that expansion sides have got a little bit of ground to make up, and not just expansion sides, foundation sides. There are challenges that we face with a state-based draft in
Mhm.
terms of making sure that our lists stay equal and competitive. There's a little bit of work to consider, or a little bit of work to be done in that space. But I think the AFL were really bold in jumping to 18 teams in the seventh season. But I think there was a lot of criticism around that. I know a lot of different opinions around, have we expanded too quickly? I'm also of the opinion that once upon a time, AFLW as a concept was continually pushed back, into the too hard basket, too hard, no one's going to watch, no one's going to care. It always seemed like that carrot was being pulled further and further away. So I actually, I understand the challenges. I understand the um, the thinking behind some of the strong opinions around expansion. But in many ways, I actually also love that we've got 18 clubs now, and it means clubs are forced to, if every club wants to be competitive, you've got to get better. How do you do that? You've got to invest in your program, invest in your players, invest in your women, and it makes clubland a better place. I can tell you that much.
100% agree with you. I have spent many a podcast with that same argument, and the internet has its trolls. The internet have the people that say this and that, and it's like, my favorite is, it's like, if you don't like it, don't watch it, don't comment. Goodbye.
Yeah,
It's not that
yeah,
simple.
yep.
It's not that difficult. There's way too many people that give an opinion that, honestly, my favorite question I like to ask: do you even watch the game? And my favorite is when they go, and I go, exactly. You aren't watching it. Stop
Yeah,
talking about it. It's like music.
yeah,
If you don't like a music genre, don't listen to it. It's really not that big a
yeah.
deal. So we won't go into a diet. We
Oh.
won't go into that diatribe. So we'll go to it. I have another really good friend who's a huge
Yep.
Giants fan. His name is Rick
Hmm.
Shaibani. So his first thing is, what's the best thing about being a GWS Giant?
The song, of course, Rick. Nah. The song. Well, the best thing about it, look, it's the youngest AFL club. And because of that, we have to do things differently. We're based in a non-traditional AFL zone, so we have to do things differently to grow our supporter base, to bring new people in. We've got a lot of players both in the AFL women's program, and the netball program who, you know, the Giants is now home away from home. A lot of our players have moved from interstate to create this club. And because of that, there really is, I know people use the term all the time, but there really is a family feel. I think we do the integration piece really well in terms of crossover between programs. Um, it's not just all the boys are in, the girls are in there. It's really integrated. Feel like we've got strong relationships across every facet of the club, and at the end of the day, you play footy because you like working with other people, or you like working hard towards success with other people, and that's what I think the club. That's a club-wide ethos. So it's a special place.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm very fascinated for this because you being a Victorian and being around Melbourne a lot, is it better to be in Sydney in terms of the living a more low-key lifestyle as opposed to the Melbourne kind of fishbowl that is discussed a lot in the men's game?
The Melbourne bubble. Well, I think it's probably at this stage. It'd be interesting to hear Toby's answer to this question. I think some of the boys might enjoy living in Sydney. But yeah, I think the AFLW is still in its infancy. It's kind of cool when some of our girls, get recognised at the airport. I know Cora gets, wherever you go, someone knows Cora Staunton. It's quite phenomenal, her stardom. But no, I love living in Sydney because of the beaches and the environment and the weather. But equally, I love getting home to Melbourne whenever I can. So it's nice. When I first moved up to Sydney, it was bizarre because I used to be heavy on the newspapers, reading every single article about anything to do with AFL. And then when I first moved up here, it was all NRL, which confused me for a while. So no, I do love the Melbourne footy scene. I am still part of that when I can be. But it's nice to get back up here to the beaches and Bondi Beach and whatnot.
It's its own little world from what I hear. It's fascinating. And I remember I was listening to the Rush Hour in Sydney and they were talking footy, but then they were talking about the Broncos. And like, what do they? Oh, they call NRL footy. So it took me a little. I have to translate. Whenever I listen to that podcast, I have to wait on it until they start talking about teams before I figure out what footy they're talking about. So that's always a fun one. That's always a fun one for me. So, and then Rick's last question: any personal or team goals for the Giants heading into the off season?
Personal or team goals? Yeah. First and foremost, the girls, every AFLW player has been told you need to kind of give yourself a little bit of time off. The 2 seasons in 1 year, the 2 pre-seasons in 1 year. It's pretty big when you juggle everything else that's going on in your life. It's been a pretty big year. So I think everyone's enjoying a little bit of downtime right now. But team goals, we're pretty focused on making sure that we come back better and ready to go. We know that there are some areas that we need to get a lot better at if we want to be competing against the best of the best in the competition. We've done a lot of homework. The coaches and the staff have done a lot of homework, a lot of statistical work around where we sit against the top 4 sides, and where that's what we want to get to. So there'll be a fair few off-season cardio specials at a beach somewhere, but we want to make sure that we're enjoying that hard work. Footy's fun when you work hard and you achieve something. So like I said, we do have a clear impatience to get better quick. We want to be playing finals, and this off-season and this pre-season, we're certainly working towards that. And that's me personally as well. That you can get frustrated when you're not playing the footy that you want to play individually and collectively. And to me, that drives a hunger to train harder and do more. So I don't sit still well. So the club are telling me you got to take some time off, but I'm certainly keen to jump back into it. They have to hold me back at the boys' training. I want to get involved.
That's fantastic. Absolutely love that. So we'll move on to a couple of questions from Michael, who's huge on Twitter. I'm not going to try his last name. I'm going to butcher it if I try. So I'm not even going to try. So Michael, you know who you are. I've reached out to you. His first question: we're seeing growth in player numbers for women in Sydney, having a pathway into the AFLW. Can we expect to see more Sydney players at the Giants as future years unfold?
I hope so. I really do hope so. I've been quite vocal in just through my experiences in, I guess, the development pathways, coaching down in Victoria and then coaching up here as well. And there's a little bit of ground to make up just because it's, I guess, we're competing against rugby up here and soccer as well. So the explosion of female participation is is fantastic. It's huge. I want to see further investment in that. I want to see further investment in coaching, because that's how we fast track player development. No matter what state you live in, you've got to have quality coaches. So I'd love to see more Sydney-based girls drafted to the Giants. I think, if you look at our top three in the BNF this year, they're all New South Wales born and bred girls in Elise Parker, Georgia Garnett and Tani Evans. So, it's really heartwarming to see how many young boys and girls are playing footy now. We want more New South Wales talent making up our numbers. And, again, I make no apologies in calling for greater investment in the development pathways, because the numbers are there, the talent's there, the athletes are there. We've just got to capture them and make sure that they're being channeled into orange and charcoal jumpers, or now red and white jumpers, Donnie.
Actually, that's a great transition, because I'm going to throw one in myself. As I've heard from Coach Scott Gowans of the Sydney Swans, he believes that the Swans and the Giants really should try to find a way to work together to enhance the coaching in New South Wales. Do you think this is something that both clubs should really dive into? Because I think it's to the best interest of both clubs if they want to start getting local talent, until the state-based drafts of the AFLW is changed to when hopefully, I cross my fingers very soon, that you ladies become full-time professional.
Yeah, I think it's I've coached with Scott in a past life as well, so that we certainly have those relationships there. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, because we're trying to fast track the progression of young women into an AFLW system. And I think, like I said, there are certain challenges up here because of the makeup of the rugby, soccer, AFL space, and whichever's been the preferred sport for many years. We're now seeing many kids jump into AFL footy, so we need to make sure that we're getting the best quality coaching in those pathways. And I know that both clubs have their separate academies, which have in a really short period of time have been successful. I know, and some of our academy products are running around in Sydney Swans jumpers now, which is the frustration for everyone across the AFL.
I think it's both ways, because I believe Jess Doyle was a Swans Academy player, and
she was, yes.
And I think there was I know that there was a few Swans groups that I was part of that were I think they were anticipating Jess's coming over to the Swans. So when she stayed with the Giants, I think few people were thrown off a little bit, and then Cynthia Hamilton gets drafted from the Giants Academy to the Swans. So it'll be interesting to see how the academy products do. Or do they tend to stay with their academies, or does it tend to be a intermixing between the two? It'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. And I think, the academy system will stay, but is there a way where both clubs can come together and work with AFL New South Wales to present, this is where we see we need further investment across the state. It's not to benefit either or academy, this is how it is. This is what we need. Can we make it happen? And then each club academy do what they need to do. But I think there's certainly room for collaboration, just to make the game stronger, because we know that the participation's there, and we want to see the game continue to grow up here.
100% agree with you. So we'll go back to Michael. I didn't mean to dive bomb him there, but it was a perfect transition. So I had to ask that. He asked that you did 2 seasons this year. Did you prefer the January to March season, or do you prefer this August to October season?
In the long run, I think this is the second July to the later season is the right time. I didn't mind playing in the summer, apart from the fact that you didn't have much time off over Christmas with your families. You're straight back into it. But apart from that, people were really worried about the heat and whatnot. I think that wasn't such a major concern for the players in terms of, the weather. I think this is the right time now, though, in terms of, there's more of an open window. It's at the end of the AFL season, so those clubs who aren't playing AFL finals, they still have a team representing them, so supporters can go and watch. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I do think that this is the right time for AFLW, and hopefully we see it settle now, so we don't have to kind of jump around the calendar year. So, and now we get a bit of time off over the summer months.
Some well-earned time off, I can only imagine. So we'll jump to next supporter, Marco Sullivan, is huge Giants guy that I know very well. What steps are the Giants and the AFL in general taking to improve the quality of the Sydney women's AFL competition to hopefully produce more long-term success for New South Wales AFLW clubs?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's where I think it's a really important discussion that needs to be had. Particularly, it's not just under 18 talent pathways that we get draftees out of; it's out of the senior competitions too. And I think one of the frustrations up here is I'd like to see each AFL club have a state league. So we don't have a state league in Sydney at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're certainly getting talent out of these pathways, and out of that competition. But it's really important that we provide opportunities as well for coaches to come into the club. I know Alan McConnell was really big on that, bringing the community club coaches in to the club to observe training, to ask questions, to get access to some of the best coaches in the country, and Alan McConnell and his experience, to bring them in, they observe, and then they take it back to their clubs. Giants Academy, I know that we've got staff out there watching games up here, and getting local talent in for the winter series or the summer series games that we've had in the past. And for individuals, there's an opportunity for them to put their talent on display and hopefully get drafted. But if they're not, they go back to their club having learned, hopefully, having taken something away from their experiences there. They go back to the club, they bring that to their team, and it makes their team better, makes that environment better. But yeah, I think there's certainly room for us to be doing more. We've got a number of girls, like I said, we've got a really young list this year. We want them to be playing more footy, more regular footy. So I'd like to see a number of our girls go and play Sydney footy. I know a number of them already do, but hopefully we've got some of the girls that have moved into Sydney from Tasmania or the likes. I'd like to see them go and play some footy over the winter with some of the Sydney teams, and hopefully we can, we find some players to draft come whenever the next draft is out of Sydney.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. I just got one on Twitter that I'm gonna love this one because I somehow had the pleasure of seeing Fearless, the documentary that that the women did. He was just curious. Have you watched the documentary? What were your thoughts on it?
I have watched a couple of episodes. I typically don't like watching interview or listening to interviews or whatnot that I've done, and I've watched a couple of episodes. Look, I think they did a really good job. It was really weird when they were filming it at the time. Having to go about your daily business, and I swear a fair bit. So in those episodes, I came across like I don't swear at all. So that was nice to see. But yeah, I think we had a challenging year, and I think it really captured. It was a real behind the scenes look at AFLW, and I think it captured some of the stories really, really well from what I've seen. I will go and watch it in its entirety. The start of the new season, I didn't want to kind of, I was focusing on 100 different other things. So I think, yeah, they did a really, really good job from the 3 episodes that I have seen. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I know my family are really invested in what the other clubs are doing too. So I think they've got a fair few new favourites across the AFLW.
I got to see it. I was so worried because it was only going to be on Disney Plus AU, and I was steaming mad because I really wanted to see it. And I remember Steph Giochi telling me, she's like, "You got to see it, you got to see it." And I'm trying. And Hulu over here in the States actually had the entire series. It came out like one
Yeah,
every
right.
week, so it was painstaking for me to watch episode, stop, wait a week, watch episode, stop, wait a week.
Yeah,
So it was really
yeah.
frustrating, but it was absolutely magnificent. I loved it because it showed a very raw side of
Yeah.
everything that before clubs had to go through, whether it was injury, whether it was drama, whether it was COVID, whether it was not playing as well, whether it was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely gripping. I so worth the one. I'm probably gonna watch the series again at least once, just to like binge it, so I can watch all of it. Because
Yeah,
the bad part about the week breaks is sometimes you kind of forget a few things. Though it's really
yeah.
hard at the start to watch Brie Davy go down with her ACL, because you can tell she
Mm,
knows,
hmm.
because the mic catches her go, "Oh no," as
Yeah,
she's laying on the ground, you hear her scream, "Oh no," because she knows.
mm,
And it
yeah,
it nearly brought me to tears, because because you already know what happened
mm,
in the previous season, but it's like for her to know at the time exactly what just happened it's devastating. It's heart-wrenching for
yeah,
that to happen, but oh, it is worth it. It was magnificently done. Absolutely loved it.
yeah,
And then seeing Brid Stack's story personally, for you, seeing Brid Stack's stories, what
yeah,
she had to go
yeah,
through as well, was fantastic to see. And her family, and her little one that she had, was absolutely fantastic. So
yeah,
I tell anybody, if they want
yeah,
to see the raw part of AFLW, watch that series for sure. So I got two
yeah.
more fan questions, and they're from your favorite. Miss
Go for it.
Fern has sent me questions for you.
Any fan?
She wants to know why you chose number two.
Great question, Fern. Two's just been my favorite number growing up. I'm born on the 2nd of April. It was just my number for everything. I think Stephen Tingay was running around number two when I was growing up, and he was a good player. So yeah, that was my number. My sister and I both born on the 2nd. So yeah, that's my number, and has always been my state
Oh,
number, club number. Yeah.
fantastic. And then she wants to know, who's your biggest inspiration?
Um. Oh, from a personal sense, my grandma is pretty inspirational to me. Just um, I've been really lucky to have a very long and loving relationship with her, and she's been a huge supporter of mine. I'm really lucky to have lots of fantastic people in my life, but yeah, I've got a really special relationship with her. She's gone through some challenging times, but you wouldn't know it, and I'm really lucky to have had her mentor and guide me so far. My 31 years so far. So yeah, and then in saying that, I also do find it weirdly, this is a weird answer, but I actually find a lot of the young girls that I've coached who I'm playing against now as an inspiration as well. Um, I think at the time before AFLW was a thing, and you were coaching them and working with them, you were coaching them to be a part of something big that was coming. We just didn't know when and what it would look like, but it was coming, and we knew these girls were good enough. When we knew the talent they had, and it was really special to be a part of that journey. So to now see them kind of run around and absolutely dominate the competition, you know, Parks, Prasparkas, Conti, some of these girls, to see how well they're doing. It's inspirational for me to get better as a player first and foremost, but to see what they're doing and how well they are, how well they're going. It's pretty cool.
It
And
pushes
then
you.
one last person, I will say Shiloh Curtis, who
Mhm.
pretty much built the under 18 pathway in Victoria, which to be honest, I think made everyone stand up and realise what was going on, and we needed to create a pathway pretty quickly, and we needed to create a women's competition pretty quickly. So yeah, she's a big part of many of our lives.
Fantastic. Absolutely great. So we're kind of winding down. We get to some of my favorite questions. These are fun ones. These are ones
Yeah,
that are going
and
to
I'll keep
make
them
you
short.
think. I love this. I'm going to install you as the AFLW list manager. All of the
Yep.
17 other clubs are completely open. You can get one player from the entire competition to join the Giants for next season. Who is it and why?
Well, it's probably Monconti. I spoke about it earlier. I just think she's a midfielder that she's not I wouldn't say she's a big bodied midfielder, but she wins contested ball. She gets away out of traffic out to the outside so she can use her skills, and she kicks goals. So just
That'd be a scary
but
midfield with you.
imagine
It'd be a
her and
scary
Parker.
midfield. Exactly. Her, Parker, and you, that three. That's a scary
Oh
trio
no.
there. All right. Let's have some fun. We talked a little bit about your teammates. So I always like finding
Yep.
out a little bit. So first teammate to come in mind when I say this. Who's the
Okay.
team mom?
Me.
All right. All right.
Or
That's not
Cora.
or Cora. All right. All right. Who's the
Yeah.
funniest? Who's got the best jokes?
Pepper Randall.
All righty. Who's the toughest?
Pepper Randall or Parker
Alrighty. Who's the social
or
butterfly?
Catherine Smith.
Okay, all right. Who's the social butterfly?
Um, oh, there's a few of them, Donnie. Georgia Garnett, Izzy Huntington,
Alrighty.
or yeah, there's a few of them.
All right. Who's the most emotional?
Me. Uh, God, I don't know. A few players play with their heart in their sleeve. Probably me.
I'm sensing a pattern here. Okay,
My teammates would say it's me.
who's the
The
quirky?
emotional mum.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Who's the quirkiest? Who's the most interesting kind of offbeat type of person in the room?
Quirky. Isadora McClay. She hasn't played yet. She did her knee. She's pretty quirky. Or Georgia Garnett.
All righty. And last one. Who's the best cook? Who's the one that you want to go over and have dinner with?
I think Nick Barr would be a pretty good cook. She's pretty yeah, she's got a wide palette. She's lived in so many different countries in her short lifespan. So yeah, she's pretty quirky in her own way too, Nikki Bay. But yeah, dinner with Nick Barr.
All righty. All righty. So we've done player, we've done coach. I want you to put your fan hat on for just the tiniest bit.
Yep.
When you go to the footy, what's your go-to food at the footy?
Oh, probably chips.
Alrighty, chips.
Yeah.
All right, next one. Where is your ideal place to sit and watch a game of footy?
Uh, the coach's box, level 2 center wing.
Alrighty, and then this is my favorite one because I've gotten so many different answers on this. What is the favorite game of footy that you have ever seen? Doesn't matter, men's, women's, doesn't matter. Favorite game of
Oh,
footy you've ever seen?
oh, uh, God, there was a final this year. Um, which one was that? It was a Brisbane final this year. Must have been that memorable. I can't remember. The final series this year in the AFL
Mm-hmm.
was one of the most epic final
Are
series.
you thinking the Brisbane Richmond game, the first game, the elimination
Yeah, that
final?
one.
Yep.
Yeah, that was insane.
That was a cracking game. Neither team wanted to play defense.
Neither team. Yeah. I mean, I know people are all anti the draw in footy, but the drawn grand final between Collingwood and St Kilda was an epic game.
Mm-hmm.
And
2010.
I'm a huge, yeah, I'm a huge Lenny Hayes fan. And when he won the Norm Smith in the drawn grand final, I've asked him about it, and it's still, I don't think I get much of a response from him. But that was an epic game. But God, there was a few cracking games in the AFLW final series too.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a hard question. I've watched so many games of footy, Donnie.
Mm-hmm.
So
It is.
many, too
It
many.
is. It is. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story about that 2010 grand final that was a draw. We had a team grand final watch party over at our president's home, and most of us had only been playing like a year, so we hadn't seen many grand finals. I'd seen a few as a kid. I had a channel over here that was called Fox Sports World, so I got to see some footy when I was a little bit younger, but I didn't 100% understand it. I watched it, kind of got it, but didn't. But when I started playing over here, we had a grand final party for 2010 and the draw grand final, and the most interesting memory was sitting there when the final siren goes off and everyone in the place goes. We look at our Australian who, and we said, Paul, are they gonna play overtime? He goes, nope, they come back next week. And just every jaw hit the floor. We were like, what are you talking about? You don't play overtime? He goes,
Yeah,
nope, you get a replay next week. And just the silence in the entire room. So it was one of the
yeah,
most interesting memories I have of that 2010 grand final is going to a watch party and getting the draw and nobody really understanding it. So I agree with you. I thought the 10 grand final, the first game that was a draw, was absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite ones.
Yeah,
2009 was great.
yeah.
2012 was really good too. Swans
That
Hawks again,
was
not just the Swans final.
Swans Hawks.
Yep, that was
Yeah,
that. I loved that one because of the back and forth nature. Both teams had their
yeah.
runs, so it was absolutely fantastic. And then
True.
for the women's this year, I think the grand final. I know some people didn't like it. I loved the grand final. I thought it was great footy. Both teams were really
Yeah,
tough, great at the contest. Yes, the scoring wasn't, I think, where some people want it, but I really don't care. I like seeing good, structurally good defensive footy. I don't mind it. So personally,
yeah,
I loved that game. I thought the grand final was fantastic.
yeah. I think any grand final that ends in such close fashion, it's always a memorable one. And I think just watching the role Kate Hall played for the D's,
Hmm.
just get it setting up behind the footy, probably a match winner in that sense. And yeah, incredible scenes to see Daisy lift the Premiership Cup. I
Hmm.
know that was really special. So yeah, there's so many games of footy, Donny. We could do a whole other podcast, perhaps memorable games of footy.
We could.
Dissect them all.
I've debated about that, and I know I have a friend of mine who lives in Ohio who's another huge footy fan. He's actually doing a podcast series called Most Memorable Game, and he's getting footy supporters to sit down and have a chat about their most memorable game, whether it's their favorite
Mm-hmm.
game or not. And it's a very fascinating series that I actually get a kick out of. Is a gentleman on Twitter called the Yank on the Footy, and he does a podcast, and he's absolutely
Okay.
fantastic. So he's doing, like I
Yeah.
said, they're doing the most memorable game series right now, which is absolutely awesome. So Craig, I'm
Wow.
giving you a shout out on this interview. So better like it, buddy. No, and that's gonna
Yeah,
do it
that's
from
cool.
that's going to do it for my questions, Alicia. This has been fantastic. I love your insight again. Maybe it's the coach in me, but I like talking with other coaches. I'm trying as much as I can for an American to learn the sport and to get better at coaching. So having this connection is absolutely fantastic. I love talking with you. I really appreciate it. I am a huge AFLW supporter. I may be a Swan supporter, but I am an AFLW supporter just as much. There's not a team that I dislike. There's not a player that I dislike in the entire competition. So I'm nothing but a supporter, nothing but an ally. So from me as one supporter to you, Alicia, thank you for what you do. Keep up the great work. We're fully behind you. We cannot wait for this thing to continue to grow.
Thanks, Donny. I've really loved the chat, and yeah, I know you're a Swannies man, but when the Giants are playing anyone but the Swans, make sure you get some orange and charcoal on.
I
Thanks
definitely
for the
keep
chat.
I definitely keep an eye on it for sure, and definitely will do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our chat today. Keep an eye out. I'm gonna start my fan supporter series. We're going to start talking to fans. I've got some other things in the works here. I'm trying to maybe work out some connections with some footy podcasts. So, if you know a footy podcast from your club, reach out to me on the socials. Let me know. Tell me what podcast I should be listening to for your club. Hopefully, very soon we will have that out. Thank you for your time, and we will be back again very soon.